Hey guys, I'm about to head off to the gym right now, and before doing this, I was reading an article that I came across a while back that looks at some of the ideas that have persisted in the literature and in fitness culture about um, the best way to put on muscle. Um, and conventionally, if you were to talk to most personal trainers, most people who've studied that the accepted literature, the ACSM position stance, the kind of conventional wisdom out there is that a sort of moderate level of intensity, maybe something you can do 8 to 12 reps of, right, which will often be 60 between 60 and 75% of your max for that particular lift, kind of depending on your particular body, your neurological capabilities, as well as the exact lift you're doing. But that's kind of the accepted wisdom, right? And why is that? Well, the one of the big take homes from a lot of the studies that examine this, when they look at protein synthesis, and by the way, protein synthesis, or MPS as it often is listed in the literature, it just refers to the rate at which your body is creating new protein. In this particular case, the rate at which it's creating protein that'll be used in the contractile portion of your muscles. So there's a direct relationship between how big and strong your muscles are and how much protein synthesis there is over time. Basically, if the synthesis exceeds the breakdown, then you're going to build up over time more and more muscle. That's how you gain, right? So we've had studies that have examined this, and what we've seen is that there's a big relationship between protein synthesis that you get after a workout and fiber recruitment. Because we've got different types of fibers, right? To keep it simple for those of you who aren't really familiar with the material or with the concept, you got these slower twitch type 1 fibers that are weaker, but they have better endurance. So typically, if you're going about your day-to-day activities, if you have to do a particular exercise, your body will recruit that one first. And if you can get the job done with that smaller fiber that takes less energy to fuel and less neurological effort, then it's going to use that. And then if you have a load that requires more force, then you're going to kind of step up to the bigger and bigger guys until you're using the biggest fibers, the most powerful ones you have. In this case, in humans, be the type 2X fibers. And there are differences in terms of the endurance, right? The bigger ones don't have as much endurance, but they have greater force output capabilities. But I'm not going to get into too technical of a talk about that. But the basic idea is that if you go through all of them and you're able to recruit up to your biggest threshold fibers, so you basically get what's called a maximal fiber recruitment during your workout, that seems to stimulate protein synthesis the best. And in turn, seems to help stimulate the most muscle growth over time. So that's why the thinking is that there's at least, you have to lift somewhat heavy, right, to get hypertrophy or to get muscle growth. However, this paper I was reading recently reminded me of some things that I think are important to share, which is that there have been some studies done that show a lower load or a lower weight being lifted, something as low as about 30% of what a person's 1 rep max might be. And for lots of those, in the case of a study they were pointing out, they did a knee extension exercise on a machine, and were able to get something like 24 reps before they failed, right? So they're not lifting super, super heavy, and they're not limited to quite as few reps. They're able to get more reps in a set, but they still go until what's considered volitional fatigue, basically when you fail to finish out the rep. And what we find is that when those type 1 fibers, the ones that are going to be recruited first during a lighter lift, once those guys get tired, well, we start progressing anyway to those higher threshold fibers. What's that mean? Well, that means that when the weak guys get tired, the bigger guys are going to come in to do the job anyway. And so if we keep going until we're completely fatigued, until we're completely done, and start reaching muscle failure during an exercise, we're going to wear out those big guys anyway, even if we don't have to use a very heavy load. So what they found when studying this was that they were able to elicit the same kind of responses with something like a 30% of your 1 rep max, a relatively low weight. That's pretty light, as compared to much higher threshold weight somebody could lift maybe only 12 times or 10 or 6 times. Why do I say all this? Well, if you're, for whatever reason, afraid of putting a whole lot of heavy weight on in terms of, squatting heavy or benching heavy or whatever your lift is, maybe you had an injury, maybe you've had some degree of trauma in the past, or maybe your technique's not very good, you're not experienced yet, but you still want to start growing. Well, this evidence seems to indicate that you can actually stimulate growth, develop muscle growth, without having to put on a lot of heavy weight on the bar or on the machine. You don't have to lift extremely heavy to do it. You just have to continue until you are actually fatigued. I wanted to make that point. It's more about making sure that you've worn out all of the muscle fibers that you're going to use or that you want to use and stimulate growth in throughout the workout than it is how much raw weight you're lifting. So keep that in mind whenever you go to the gym. Try it out and see if you can get some gains that way in terms of size. If you're somebody who's really looking, to put on, just put on muscle mass. Now, if you're looking to build strength and actually get as strong as possible, that's a different animal because there's a neurological component to that. And so for that, you really do need, at least on occasion, to hit some heavier weights. Not every day, not every time you work out, but at regular intervals, and I might talk about that more in the future, to keep your nervous system kind of tuned in to the lift that you're trying to do and help it stay primed on how to recruit muscles and muscle fibers in the correct sequence and the correct configuration so that you can actually perform a heavier lift for the same amount of muscle mass. But if your goal is just muscle mass, without, getting absolutely as strong as possible, you will still get stronger. But without getting maximal strength gains, if it's just about putting on as much muscle mass as possible, you can do that with relatively low weight. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, why would you want to do that? There are a number of health benefits associated with muscle mass. Independent of strength, your resting metabolic rate will go up because you have more muscle that just burns more calories throughout the day. So in terms of weight management, it's a huge thing. Also, there's a glucose management or blood sugar management aid that you get there because muscles are a great storage place for glucose in your body. The vast majority, and most healthy people, the vast majority of the glucose in the body is stored in the form of glycogen in your muscles. Something like give or take around 80%, 70 to 80%, maybe even more depending on the person and how massive they are. So it helps your body to regulate blood sugar by giving it a place to put that blood sugar. And also can help with just overall insulin sensitivity and a number of other hormonal impacts that are really, really good. So there are a variety of health benefits that you can get just from having more muscle mass, all things being equal. So that's why I'm talking about this. A lot of people think they don't want to get big and strong, but there are some serious benefits to it. And if you don't have to be afraid of lifting super heavy weight, and you can still get the benefits of putting on muscle, it's something to look into, and it's something I really recommend. Some degree of strengthening and putting on muscle is something I think almost everybody out there, particularly in the U.S. where there's a lot of obesity and there are a lot of people who are just really unfit, I think it's an important thing to consider. So wanted to talk about that, about 8 minutes, kind of lengthy as always. So hopefully you got something out of this. I'm going to post a link in a comment underneath this video to the article that inspired this by a guy named Nicholas Burd and a few other authors as well, including Stu Phillips, who's a very respected, an extremely respected exercise physiology professor and writer and academic in the field. So hopefully you got something out of this. Feel free to comment, shoot me a message, a question if you need clarification. But I wanted to share this before I headed out to the gym. I was thinking about it. So, hopefully you got some out of it.